We've considered thus far the biological origins of human nature, and from this information, the idea that a large part of human creativity is generated by the inevitable and necessary conflict between the individual and group levels of natural selection. The implied unity in the explanation leads us to the next leg of the journey I suggest. It is the concept that science and the humanities share the same foundation, in particular, that the laws of physical cause and effect can somehow ultimately account for both. You will likely recognize this proposition. Western culture has already traveled this way. It was called the Enlightenment. During the 17th and 18th centuries, the idea of the Enlightenment ruled the Western intellectual world. At that time, it was a juggernaut. In the minds of many, it even seemed to be the destiny of the human species. Scholars appeared on track to explain both the universe and the meaning of humanity by the laws of science, the latter called at that time natural philosophy. The great branches of learning, Enlightenment scholars believed, can be unified by a continuous network of cause and effect. Then, when built from reality and reason alone, cleansed of superstition, all of knowledge might come together to form what in 1620 Francis Bacon, greatest of the Enlightenment's forerunners, termed the Empire of Man. The Enlightenment quest was driven by the belief that entirely on their own, human beings can know all that needs to be known, and in knowing, understand, and in understanding, gain the power to choose more wisely than ever before. By the early 1800s, however, the dream faltered and Bacon's empire retreated. There were two reasons. First, although scientists were generating discoveries at an exponential pace, they were nowhere close to meeting the expectations of the more optimistic Enlightenment thinkers. Second, this shortfall allowed the founders of the Romantic tradition of literature, including some of the greatest poets of all time, to reject the presumptions of the Enlightenment worldview and seek meaning in other, more private venues. Science had no way, and it never would, to touch what people deeply feel and express only through the creative arts. Reliance on scientific knowledge, many believed, and their contemporary successors continued to believe, beggars the human potential. For the next 2 centuries, and to the present day, science and the humanities went their own ways. Physicists, of course, no less continue to enjoy playing in string quartets, and novelists write books that marvel at the wonders uncovered by science. But the two cultures, as they came to be called by the middle of the 20th century, were considered by most to be separated by a permanent chasm built into the mind, perhaps intrinsic to the nature of existence itself. In any case, there was simply no time during the long eclipse of the Enlightenment to think of unification. In order to accommodate the rising flood of information, scientific disciplines were dividing into specialties at a near bacterial rate, fast, then faster, and then even faster. The creative arts, for their part, continued to flower with brilliant and idiosyncratic expressions of the human imagination. There was very little interest in trying to reignite what was perceived as an antique and hopeless philosophical quest. Yet the Enlightenment was never proved to be impossible. It was not dead. It was just stalled. Is there any value in resuming the quest now, and any chance of achieving it? Yes, because enough is known today to make it more attainable than during its first flowering, and yes, because the solutions of so many problems of modern life hinge on solutions for the clash of competing religions, the ambiguity